From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The world will now expect the Assad regime to live up to its public commitments. And as I said at the outset of these negotiations, there can be no games, no room for avoidance, or anything less than full compliance by the Assad regime.
As the United States and Russia reach a deal for Syria to surrender its chemical arsenal, we'll look at what the pact means for U.S.-Russian relations and the future of the Syrian civil war. We'll speak with Katrina vanden Heuvel of The Nation and Andrew Bacevich, author of the new book Breach of Trust, How Americans Failed Their Soldiers and Their Country. Then 50 years ago, on September 15, 1963, the Ku Klux Klan bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, killing 4 little girls between the ages of 11 and 14. We'll turn to professor and activist Angela Davis, who grew up in Birmingham and knew 2 of the girls.
As much talk as there has been about terrorism over the last decade, I have not heard one official acknowledgement of the terrorism that prevailed in places like Birmingham.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The results of a United Nations report on the alleged chemical attack in Syria last month are set for release today, 2 days after the United States and Russia announced a diplomatic breakthrough that averts, for now, the potential for U.S. strikes. On Saturday, Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, said they'd reached a deal to destroy or remove Syria's chemical weapons by the middle of next year. The deal calls for President Bashar al-Assad's regime to provide a complete list of its chemical weapons resources within a week. An inspection of all chemical weapons sites and destruction of equipment for making the weapons would then be completed by November. During a visit to Israel Sunday, Kerry reiterated the threat of U.S. strikes if the deal fails.
Now, this will only be as effective as its implementation will be. And President Obama has made it clear that to accomplish that, the threat of force remains. The threat of force is real, and the Assad regime and all those taking part need to understand that President Obama and the United States are committed to achieve this goal.
We'll have more on Syria after headlines. Larry Summers has withdrawn his name from consideration to succeed Ben Bernanke as the next chair of the Federal Reserve. Summers, a former economic advisor to President Obama and Treasury Secretary under President Clinton, was seen as the lead contender for the post, but several key Democrats had voiced opposition to the prospect of his nomination. Summers drew criticism over his role in pushing deregulatory policies that helped cause the financial crisis, and for his suggestion while president of Harvard University that women have less innate scientific ability than men. In a letter to Obama on Sunday, Summers wrote, quote, "I've reluctantly concluded that any possible confirmation process for me would be acrimonious," he wrote. Speculation now shifts to other top candidates, including Federal Reserve Vice Chair Janet Yellen. Iraq is continuing to see its worst wave of violence since 2008. On Sunday, at least 58 people died in car bombings and other violent attacks which hit mainly Shiite-dominated areas. At least 27 people died in separate attacks on Saturday. A top female police officer in Afghanistan's Helmand province has died of her injuries after being shot by unknown gunmen on Sunday. Lieutenant Nagara died at the hospital today, just over 2 months after the murder of her predecessor, Lieutenant Islam Bibi, who is also a woman. Women make up less than 1% of Afghanistan's police force. Neither of the women's killers have been arrested or even identified. Meanwhile, a suicide car bomber who apparently tried to attack a NATO-Afghan convoy near the city of Kandahar missed the target and instead killed at least 3 civilians. One official said 2 of those killed were children. A new report by Human Rights Watch accuses security forces in the Gulf island nation of Bahrain of routinely detaining children without cause and imposing, quote, ill treatment that may rise to the level of torture. According to the report, children in Bahrain are often held for long periods of time, threatened with torture and beaten. The Bahrain Center for Human Rights recorded 15 detentions of children suspected of involvement in pro-democracy protests in the month of August alone. The report came amidst clashes between protesters and security forces following the death of a 22-year-old protester. Bahrain is a key U.S. ally and home to the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. In Mexico City, some 3,600 police descended on teachers in the main square Friday, deploying tear gas, a water cannon tank, and helicopters to clear a month-long encampment against controversial education reform measures. More than 30 people were arrested, dozens wounded. The government ordered the eviction so spectators could gather in the square Sunday to hear President Enrique Peña Nieto perform the traditional grito, or shout, marking the anniversary of the start of the Mexican War of Independence. Tens of thousands of teachers have been protesting the president's reforms, including standardized teacher evaluations. Many are from the southern state of Oaxaca, where they played a key role in the 2006 popular uprising. After the crackdown, the teachers regrouped, forming a new encampment roughly a mile away at the Monument to the Revolution, where thousands gathered Sunday for an alternative shout ceremony. Benito Vasquez, press secretary of Oaxaca's Section 22 of the Teachers Union, condemned Friday's repression by the federal government.
We were repressed by the federal police and members of the National Guard dressed as civilians. They attacked with tanks, tear gas, and explosives. There were 31 people detained, our fellow teachers were assaulted, and our general secretary was attacked by the federal police.
Mexico, meanwhile, has been hit by torrential rain, landslides, and flooding from Hurricane Ingrid and Tropical Storm Manuel, which have buffeted opposite coasts, killing at least 21 people and prompting thousands to evacuate. Historic floods have continued to devastate Colorado, sweeping through 15 counties, leaving more than 1,200 people unaccounted for, shattering rainfall records, cutting off entire communities, destroying or damaging roughly 19,000 homes, and forcing thousands to evacuate. The National Guard's been deployed. 5 people are confirmed dead, and a 6th, an elderly woman, is presumed dead after her home washed away. Many have raised concerns about toxic contamination from oil, gas, and chemicals used in the gas drilling process known as fracking, after at least one industry pipeline broke and began leaking. A police officer in North Carolina has been charged with involuntary manslaughter for the fatal shooting of an unarmed African-American man who is apparently seeking help after crashing his car. According to police, 24-year-old Jonathan FERRELL knocked on the door of a home in Charlotte after surviving a car wreck early Saturday morning. The woman who answered called 911 when she didn't recognize FERRELL. Police say they found him nearby and fired a taser at him when he ran toward them. They say he failed to stop, so one of the officers opened fire, killing FERRELL, a former football player for Florida A&M University who'd recently gotten engaged. Police initially called the encounter appropriate and lawful, but later said the shooting was excessive and that the officer did not have a lawful right to fire his gun. The officer, RANDALL, KERRICK, has been released on bond after turning himself in. Meanwhile, police in New York City opened fire on an unarmed man near Times Square Saturday, missing their target but hitting 2 female bystanders who were both wounded and taken to the hospital. The man had reportedly been behaving erratically. He was tasered, taken into custody, and charged. A judge on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court has ordered the Obama administration to review for possible declassification the court's own secret opinions on the National Security Agency's program of sweeping up Americans' phone records. The ruling by Judge F. Dennis Saylor came in response to a motion by the American Civil Liberties Union. Judge Saylor said the public release of the documents could help fuel a, quote, informed debate spurred by leaks from Edward Snowden. Obama has appointed former acting head of the White House Budget Office, Jeffrey Zients, to serve as the next director of his National Economic Council after Gene Sperling leaves in January. The panel oversees economic policies. Zients' record includes a stint at Bain & Company and a spot on Fortune magazine's list of the 40 richest under 40 in 2004. In a victory for Native Americans in Idaho, a federal judge has temporarily blocked a massive load of equipment bound for tar sands oil fields in Canada from passing through tribal land and along federally protected rivers. Environmentalists and members of the Nez Perce tribe had formed blockades to stop earlier loads of oil-related equipment. On Thursday, U.S. District Judge B. Lynn Windmill blocked a shipment planned for next week and ordered the U.S. Forest Service to conduct an impact study before allowing the cargo to pass through national forest land. Sunday marked the 50th anniversary of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, a watershed moment in the civil rights movement. On September 15, 1963, a dynamite blast killed 4 young girls in the church. Denise McNair was 11, Carol Robertson, Cynthia Wesley, and Addie Mae Collins, all 14. 3 days later, at a funeral for 3 of the girls, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. honored them as martyred heroines.